they are actually compelling people who have customary rights to land to take up leases with the Ingonyama Trust in rural areas, in the villages. People who've lived there for generations now have to pay the Ingonyama Trust board rental, which is more than 1,000 rand, and it escalates annually by 10%. I have a sample of that lease agreement. It's an ordinary lease that you sign with any landlord anyway. But this is what the people in the rural villages are subjected to. And then, of course, you see, they complain bitterly, these communities. They complain about the officials from the department. They complain about the traditional leaders. And their coming out was really very courageous, because there are people there who were even in, even as they were making their inputs, trying to intimidate them and so on. So I think the approach which confronts us as the ANC must really be to understand that the ANC enjoys support from the people, not from traditional leaders. Some traditional leaders support, or pledge their support to the ANC. But the majority of them are acting as village tin pot dictators to the people there. And the people had hopes, high hopes, that the ANC will liberate them from all these confines of homelands system. But clearly now, we are now the ones who are saying, no, the land must go to traditional leaders, not to the people. I'm stressing this point because we need to understand what we are doing. We need to be very clear how these people in the rural areas will view this organization and its government going forward. And so in our recommendations, we say that because one of the things that became very clear was that land hunger is really not in rural areas. The former homelands are already densely overpopulated. So there's very little land there. That's why redistribution is far much more important than all the other rights. We must be clear about that. So land hunger is in the main in urban areas. That's where land hunger manifests itself. And so we must deal with this question of land hunger in the urban areas as a really low-hanging fruit. And we must release well-situated land with immediate effect. Some of these land in the urban areas is owned by parastatals, these state-owned enterprises, where we must get that land to be available for human settlement and redistribution in the urban areas. And we must issue people in the urban areas with title deeds. The people who've been paying rent in the townships must be issued with title deeds. There's no need to procrastinate about that. Absolutely no need. We must issue them with title deeds. They will then have assets in their possession with immediate effect. And then you see the invisible people in rural areas, the ones who are on the farmlands and in the former homelands. Because the land has not been surveyed and demarcated, we must use modern technology, GPS technology, to record where they are now and give that recognition legal expression. It must be in law, so that they should no longer be vulnerable to the whims and machinations of all these indunas and such like people and developers, because the the people are very, very, very vulnerable, and you see it from time to time. A farmer who has had families working for him for over 30 years, and this farmer sells his farm to his nephew, and the nephew gives these people 1 month to leave the farm. 1 month. So we must give them legal protection, record their presence there, and give it recognition that they own the piece of land, they've earned it where they live. I mean, there are cases in the Northwest, you see, and Comrade Gwede, I think, is already aware of this. In the Northwest province, there's a fund, you see, an account, which houses royalties from mining operations. And the communities, Bapoba, Mukhale, have lost millions. And the premiers of Northwest refuse to account for these millions that have disappeared. And these are ANC premiers. So I think we need to be very clear about this, because these communities are aggrieved, very deeply aggrieved, by the fact that the accounts disappear, and it's all between the office, because the account is in the office of the premier, and so that should really be providing more transparency and accountability to the people. There's also the case of Bakataba Kafela, who used to be under the leadership of Nyalala Pilani, who was challenged. He used to interdict community associations which wanted to get him to account about the royalties and all the resources of the community. And it turns out that actually he's not even the rightful traditional leader. Yeah. So I'm just saying, our people, you see, comrades, you see, as freedom fighters, we must really think that very deeply about how we are going to provide proper leadership and protection to the most vulnerable of our people. And those are the people who bore the brunt of dispossession and apartheid discrimination. And today we can't subject them to another layer of unrepresentative leadership structures. We must free them. We must liberate them. Lastly, there are a number of bills that were being piloted and fast-tracked through Parliament. And as a high-level panel, the people told us that, no, these laws are really going to make our lives very, very difficult. And so we wrote to the presiding officers to say, please hold these bills in abeyance. Don't fast-track them. because...
Right, those are live visuals coming from Boksburg, east of Johannesburg, where the ANC is launching its land summit. That's former President Kgalema Motlanthe who's addressing the summit there. He just said now that as freedom fighters, they need to think deeply about how they will be providing leadership to our people, to their people, people who bear the brunt of discrimination, inequality and poverty. He says these people need to be liberated. We'll, of course, continue tracking that summit for you and bringing you the latest developments.